With the world watching, finance leaders from 20 of the largest economies gathered in Pittsburgh to grapple with the worst global downturn in decades. It's a role once played by a select few, namely the U.S., Japan, Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Canada, and Russia. British Prime Minister Gordon Brown called it the beginning of a new era.
The G20 will now be seen as the premier economic organization for dealing with issues of economic management around the world.
The G20's expanded profile underscores how much the balance of power has shifted in the past 40 years. Philip Levy is a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute.
The hope is that because of the greater inclusion of developing countries, the whole apparatus gets more legitimacy.
Analysts say the G20's new prominence reflects the rising influence of emerging economies, such as China, India, and countries in Latin America. Mark Zandi is a senior economist at moodyseconomy.com.
These are young economies. These are economies that are just coming into their own. Big populations that are going to truly emerge. And these folks in these countries are going to want more, and the U.S. and the rest of the developed world is going to sell to them. So the growth has to come from these emerging economies.
Collectively, the G20 countries carry enormous financial clout, comprising 85% of the world's economic output and representing 2/3 of the world's population. Analysts say that gives the G20 nations the ability and the credibility to address the root causes of the global meltdown.
Front and center now is, of course, getting out of this recession.
Author and former New York Times columnist Leslie Gelb has written extensively about the global economy.
The G20 countries in particular, because they constitute a good deal of the world's economy, must act together, because if they act on their own, they'll act to protect their own internal economic interests, which in turn will bring about pressures for protectionism.
Among the crucial issues facing the global economy, rising budget deficits and a growing dependence on export markets. Economist Philip Levy says such discussions would not be possible without input from countries such as China.
If you look at the world economic scene, you have China doing perhaps an excess amount of lending, and you have the United States doing an excess amount of borrowing. So to have discussions about fixing that without China at the table, you don't get very far.
Leaders of the G20 Economic Council declared major progress Friday in their coordinated efforts to prevent a global financial collapse, but they cautioned the work is far from over. Canada and South Korea are co-hosting the next G20 summit scheduled for June of next year. Arcega, VOA News.